Today, Antarctica is the most desolate place on Earth. Miles of ice, howling winds, and a handful of penguin species that somehow adapted to this frozen hell. But it wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, this continent was teeming with life. Forests grew thick, and predators you've never heard of stalked the land. So what happened to this lost world? You're about to discover what Antarctica was like before it became an icy wasteland. Millions of years ago, the world map looked completely different. Antarctica wasn't floating alone on a continent called Gondwana. Picture this: South America, Africa, Australia, India, and our star of the show, all connected as one giant landmass. But the tectonic plates beneath the continents are constantly moving, very slowly but relentlessly. Around 180 million years ago, Gondwana started breaking apart. Africa split off first, then India drifted north. Antarctica didn't separate from Australia and South America until about 30 to 40 million years ago. When that connection finally severed, the continent's fate changed forever. What it was like. So before the ice took over, Antarctica was a totally different world. The climate was much warmer, not tropical, sure, but definitely livable. Dense forests covered the land, ancient conifers and ferns that grew to massive sizes. Later, closer to our time, southern beech trees appeared, relatives of species that still grow in Chile and New Zealand today. Rivers flowed across the landscape, swamps formed in the lowlands, and life thrived everywhere. But here's the weird part. Antarctica was still at polar latitudes, which meant it followed some seriously strange rules about light and darkness. In summer, the sun never set, 24-hour daylight for months. In winter, a long polar night descended, lasting for months on end. How did creatures survive in those conditions? How did they cope with the darkness? It's still one of the big mysteries, but one thing's clear: life flourished there regardless. Ecosystems concentrated around rivers and coastlines where food and shelter were plentiful. Polar didn't mean dead. This was a world that was strange, harsh, but incredibly alive. Part 3. The creatures of Antarctica. Now for the best part, who actually lived in this ancient Antarctica. Let's start on land. One of its most famous residents was Cryolophosaurus. The name means frozen crested lizard, though ironically, there was no ice at all in its time. This was an early Jurassic predator that lived around 190 million years ago. Imagine a theropod dinosaur about 21 feet long, roughly the length of a large pickup truck and a sedan combined. But its signature feature was an unusual crest on its head that stuck forward like a 1950s rocker's pompadour. What was it for? Probably for attracting mates or intimidating rivals. Cryolophosaurus was an active hunter, and it had to adapt to polar conditions. Months of total darkness is a serious challenge. Maybe it relied more on smell and hearing than sight, or perhaps it went into some kind of dormancy or slowed its metabolism. We don't know for sure, but the fossils tell us it did just fine. Its remains were found on Mount Kirkpatrick in the Transantarctic Mountains, one of the few areas where rocks from that era are exposed. Let's jump forward a few tens of millions of years to the late Cretaceous period, about 70 million years ago. The climate had become even milder, and a new character appeared, Antarctopelta. This was an ankylosaur, an armored dinosaur tank covered in bony plates with spikes along its sides and probably a club on its tail. Herbivorous, but looking ready to take on anything that messed with it. The discovery of Antarctopelta was a sensation, the first ankylosaur ever found in Antarctica, proving that even these slow, heavy creatures could survive in polar latitudes. Its remains were unearthed on James Ross Island, near the Antarctic Peninsula, in rock layers that were once the floor of an ancient forest. But there was another intriguing herbivore, Glacialosaurus, which means frozen lizard, though again, no ice in sight. It lived in the early Jurassic, roughly the same time as Cryolophosaurus, and was a relative of those giant long-necked dinosaurs that would later dominate the planet, the sauropods. Glacialosaurus itself was smaller, about 20 feet long, relatively lightweight, with a long neck and tail. It probably wandered through forests browsing leaves from the tops of ancient trees. Its lifestyle was modest but important. It shows that Antarctica's plant life was rich enough to support such creatures even during the polar night. Now let's take a leap in time. The dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago, but life in Antarctica didn't stop. The climate actually became even warmer. This was the Eocene, the golden age of mammals and birds. And that's when penguins appeared along Antarctica's shores. But these weren't the cute small creatures we know today. Some ancient penguins were true giants, standing up to 5 or even 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. Imagine a bird the size of an adult human that slices through water like a torpedo and hunts large fish. Why were they so big? Possibly because the warm Antarctic waters were full of food, and larger size helped them dive deeper and stay underwater longer. As the climate cooled, penguins got smaller, but their story in Antarctica began back then, when the continent hadn't yet frozen. And finally, let's dive into the ocean. The coastal waters of ancient Antarctica were bursting with life, maybe even more active than on land. Marine reptiles swam there, plesiosaurs with long necks and pliosaurs, stocky predators with enormous jaws. These creatures were the apex predators of their time, hunting fish, squid, and each other. In shallow lagoons and coastal zones, activity was constant. Ancient sharks, large bony fish, cephalopods. The entire food chain operating at full capacity. Why were coastal waters so important? Because the ocean brought nutrients up from the depths, and during the summer months, sunlight triggered massive plankton blooms. It was a real factory of life. And it's in the sea that most fossils have been preserved. In layers of marine sediment on islands around the Antarctic Peninsula, scientists find teeth, bones, and shell impressions. Each discovery is a piece of the puzzle helping us reconstruct that amazing world. So what happened? Why did this flourishing, life-filled continent turn into an icy desert? The answer lies in the movement of those same tectonic plates we mentioned at the start. When Antarctica finally separated from South America and Australia, wide ocean straits formed between them. That's when what's now called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current began to form, a massive flow of cold water that circles the continent like a ring. This current cut Antarctica off from the warm ocean waters that used to heat its shores. Warm water simply couldn't penetrate anymore. It was deflected, pushed away. On top of that, atmospheric carbon dioxide, CO2, the main greenhouse gas, started dropping. The reasons were varied: changes in volcanic activity, formation of mountain ranges, shifts in ocean circulation patterns. All of this together led to global cooling across the entire planet. But Antarctica got hit the hardest. Isolation did its job. Ice accumulated gradually, first on mountain peaks, then descending into valleys. Forests began to wither, plants couldn't handle the new conditions. Rivers froze for longer periods, and eventually the brief summer couldn't thaw them anymore. Ecosystems collapsed one after another. What happened to the animals? Most went extinct. They simply couldn't adapt to the cold and disappearing food sources. Some, especially those connected to the ocean, managed to migrate north to waters that were still warm enough. Penguins survived and even adapted. They became smaller but learned to endure extreme cold. Marine life, already living in water, weathered the changes better than land animals. But Antarctica's land became empty forever. Around 14 million years ago, the ice sheet fully formed, and the continent became what we know today, a white desert at the edge of the world. So there you have it. Today's coldest and most barren continent was once one of the most vibrant places on the planet. Crested predatory dinosaurs, armored giants, human-sized penguins, and marine monsters. All of this really existed, where now there's only ice and rock. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which creature surprised you the most. Cryolophosaurus, the giant penguins, or the marine reptiles? And don't forget to subscribe. There are plenty more incredible stories ahead.